Before streaming, before remote controls wore out, there was a bright little half hour that lived in Saturday morning light. Saved by the Bell premiered on NBC on August 20th, 1989, born from a retooling of Good Morning, Miss Bliss, and shaped by producer Peter Engel and creator Sam Bobrick. It was California make-believe. Lockers, laughter, and that familiar theme that seemed to promise everything would turn out all right. Even now, the memory plays like a videotape, warm at the edges. Fact number 10. The name nobody wanted. Before Bayside High became a place people swore they once attended, the show nearly went out into the world under a different name. In a meeting with NBC Entertainment chief Brandon Tartikoff, producer Peter Engel and his team, a senior producer named Tom Tenowich suggested the title Saved by the Bell. Engel disliked it. He felt it sounded like a gimmick. But Tartikoff loved it, and once a network executive falls for a title, it starts to feel inevitable. Then came the theme song. Composer Scott Gale wrote it, while Engel was quietly determined to keep the phrase, "Saved by the Bell," from being sung at all. The song was written anyway, the word stayed, and the title became the brand on lunchboxes, notebooks, and memories. It is a small reminder that television history is often shaped by the stubborn details people argue over in one room. And when we move from that meeting room to the hallway lockers, the next surprise is how the show rebuilt its whole world to get there. Fact number 9. When Indiana became a memory. Saved by the Bell began with a quiet kind of rescue. Before Bayside, the show was Good Morning, Miss Bliss, set in Indianapolis, with Haley Mills as the teacher trying to steady a room full of kids. Disney canceled it after 13 episodes, but NBC reclaimed the rights and asked Peter Engel to rebuild the idea for Saturday mornings. The setting was shifted to a sunny, fictional California suburb, and most of the cast was replaced, while Zach, Lisa, Screech, and Mr. Belding carried over like familiar faces in a new town. Years later, when those Miss Bliss episodes were folded into Saved by the Bell reruns, they were not simply aired as they were. Mark Paul Gosselaar filmed brief introductions in character as Zach, explaining these stories came from an earlier time. Even the opening sequence was refitted, so the past could sit beside the present without breaking the spell. And once you see how carefully the show protected its illusion, the next fact is about the very real places and production tricks that made Bayside feel alive. Fact number 8. A school you barely ever saw. Bayside High feels as real as any school we remember, yet the show rarely let the camera linger outside. After the move from Miss Bliss, the series mostly lived indoors, in hallways, classrooms, and the bright corners of the Max. Los Angeles Magazine notes that exterior shots were almost never used, aside from a handful of establishing shots, especially early on, using Ulysses S. Grant High School. When the production did need an exterior, IMDb lists Ulysses S. Grant High School in Van Nuys as the stand-in for Bayside. On screen, it is just a glimpse, a doorway to a world where every problem can be solved before the bell rings. That restraint also meant the show could reuse its interior sets week after week, keeping the rhythm familiar, like returning to the same seat in class. So, the real school stayed in the background, while the feeling stayed front and center, youth made permanent on tape. And in the next fact, that feeling gets even louder, because Bayside was often performed with a real crowd watching every moment. Fact 7. Laughter you could almost touch. Saved by the Bell was designed like a small piece of theater. The episodes were filmed before a live studio audience, a choice that gave the actors real timing to play against, even on a Saturday morning comedy made for kids. That audience mattered, because it taught the show where the jokes truly landed and where they needed help. Television often sweetens laughter in post-production, mixing a real crowd with added reactions so the rhythm stays smooth and the pauses feel intentional. So, when you hear those big cheers in the hallway or a wave of "ooh" after a schemer goes too far, you are hearing something half spontaneous, half carefully stitched, like a home movie edited to keep only the brightest parts. The performers learned to hold a beat, and that pause became part of the show's heartbeat. And speaking of the Max, the next fact is about how that little diner set became the show's true town square. Fact number 6, the magician behind the counter. The Max always felt like a teenager's dream of freedom, neon, milkshakes, and no adults asking questions. But the man behind the counter was not hired just to pour sodas. Ed Alonzo was cast as Max, and he was already a working magician, so the little bursts of sleight of hand were not props or camera tricks. They were part of who he was. The show even let that idea live inside the character. a diner owner who could pull a surprise out of thin air when the mood needed lifting. Over time, though, Max quietly slipped away. Alonzo's role lasted through the end of the first season, with only a single guest appearance in season 2. And then the gang's favorite hangout suddenly felt a little emptier, even if the booth stayed the same. There is something tender in that, how a familiar face can vanish from a place we thought would never change, just like real life. And the next fact is about another sudden shift when the show had to keep going after graduation, even though key cast members were already gone. Fact number 5, the extra episodes that broke the timeline. Bayside was supposed to end with caps, gowns, and a clean goodbye. Then NBC unexpectedly ordered 11 more episodes after the graduation story had already been made. By then, Tiffany Thiessen and Elizabeth Berkley had decided to leave, so the producers faced an almost impossible problem. They could not truly replace Kelly and Jesse, but they also did not want Lisa left as the only girl in the group. So they created Tori Scott, a new classmate with a tougher edge, played by Leanna Creel. Here is the strange part that viewers still feel in their bones. Those Tori episodes were mixed into the season alongside episodes that still had Kelly and Jesse because of how the episodes were produced and later aired. It made Bayside feel like a dream where people vanish, then reappear, and nobody speaks their names. And that brings us to the next fact, because some of the show's most famous moments were shaped by how young the cast really was and how fast they had to grow up on camera. Fact number 4, the blonde that was not real. Zach Morris looked like California sunshine, even when the story stayed indoors. But that famous blonde hair was not a happy accident. Mark-Paul Gosselaar later told ABC News that he was constantly dyeing his naturally darker hair blonde during the run of the show, and he laughed at the idea that he was ever truly blonde. That detail sounds small until you picture it. A real teenager sitting still, again and again, so a character could stay perfectly recognizable for kids at home. In later interviews, when he reacted to stories about unsafe kid television sets elsewhere, he said his own experience on Saved by the Bell felt protected and professional, with adults and teachers looking out for them. You can almost feel the care in that steady, unchanging image. The hair, the smile, the same face at the locker, week after week. And when you realize how much work it took to keep that illusion gentle, the next fact is about the rare time the show let a heavier subject into Bayside. Fact number 3, the story they were not allowed to tell. The episode everyone remembers for one trembling line, "I'm so excited, I'm so scared," began with a darker idea than Saturday morning television would allow.
I'm so excited! I'm so scared!
Executive producer Peter Engel has said the original script for Jesse's song involved Jesse taking speed, not caffeine pills. NBC's standards and practices refused, so the story was softened into caffeine pills, a compromise that let the warning remain, without naming the thing they feared kids might imitate. Years later, Elizabeth Berkley shared another small truth that changes how you watch it. The pills on set were not pills at all. They were candies, including Red Hots and Tic Tacs. That contrast is part of why the scene still stings. A teenage actress is giving everything she has to sell a crisis that had been carefully renamed for the audience at home. The show wanted to keep its warmth, but for a moment it let real pressure show through. And in the next fact, we move from that heavy moment to a lighter one, because some of the series' most memorable touches were born from pure improvisation on set. Fact number 2, the warm blur of videotape. Saved by the Bell looks the way it feels, soft, bright, and a little unreal, because it was shot on videotape with a multi-camera setup. It was a practical choice for a fast, weekly comedy, but it left an accidental fingerprint on Bayside. Videotape captures motion differently than film, giving faces a smooth shine and making the lockers and classroom walls glow under steady studio light. It is why the show can feel like a remembered Saturday morning, not a polished movie, more like something taped at home and watched again until the edges softened. That gentle haze also protected the illusion. Sets could stay small, the pace could stay quick, and the cast could play to the room, letting jokes and reactions land in real time. The look is part of the comfort, a reminder that this was made to be close, immediate, and familiar, like a friend waving from the screen. And next comes the biggest secret of all, the creative trick that made Zach feel like he was speaking only to you. Fact number 1, the secret friend in the camera. The smartest trick Saved by the Bell ever pulled was making you Zach's accomplice. While everyone else kept living inside the scene, Zach would glance straight into the lens, call time out, and the whole world would freeze so he could talk only to you. Wikipedia even describes the gesture like a referee signal, with time in, snapping life back on again. It was a simple device, but it changed the feeling of the show. Instead of watching teenagers, you were being trusted by one of them. Writers and critics have often compared that direct address to earlier teen icons like Ferris Bueller, another character who let the audience in on the plan. And because it was filmed like a stage comedy on videotape, those pauses could feel like a breath taken just for us. After the bell rang, what stayed was that quiet illusion that someone on the other side of the screen knew your name. Some shows do not end. They simply stop airing, and then they keep playing, quietly, inside us. Saved by the Bell was only a few years on the calendar, but it became a place people return to when the world feels too fast. A hallway, a booth at the Max, a friend in the camera, and somewhere, just out of frame, the bell still rings, calling us back to a gentler hour.